There, Michael Sherlock here. Happy Monday again. Every Monday is like a new opportunity. I don't know. It's a new opportunity to get more done. And today we're going to talk about not only just getting things done, but getting things done well or a little bit better. In fact, one of the themes for the year for me for 2022, for my team and for myself, is doing everything better. Just doing everything better. So I thought we'd start with something that's really, really important, and it's about the power of the written word or the texted word, depending on how you want to look at it. Because today we know that we're doing just as much with these little things as we are with our typing. So today I want to talk about how do we do that and how do we convey who we are, what we're doing a little bit better in our written word, and why is it important anyway? So, okay, just fair enough. And you probably saw it in the description of this. I'm, old enough to remember life before cell phones. Yes, kids, boys and girls, there was a time before cell phones. There was even a time before email. Boy, I remember when I thought that was going to make my life so much easier. And all it did was add a whole bunch of dimensions that we didn't need. But, it is what it is. Here we are. And for many years, or, really honestly, decades, we've talked about the hidden dangers of emails. And what I mean by that is not like, do you have a separate server somewhere in another email that you shouldn't be using? No, although that can be bad too. But what I'm talking about is, we've talked about that element of, are we conveying the right things in our emails? Are we sending the right message? Have we, before the use of emoticons and whether or not you should use them in professional email is another dialogue we'll dive into a little bit today. But are we sending messages or tones that we don't expect to or don't intend to? And it can be easy to say something the wrong way or type something the wrong way. So, how do we do this well, especially in the fact that today we are moving more remote, more hybrid. We have more people that are working in freelance mode or consultant mode. And I think we're going to see this trend. I really believe this trend is going to continue not only through 2022 and beyond, or into the next year, but well beyond this. And I think it's important that we take stock of it. So today we're going to talk about my top 10 tips for harnessing the power of the written or texted word. But before we dive into that, I want to give some results from a survey that I did on LinkedIn in the last month or so. I've actually done a couple that involve emails, but the one that I want to talk about today was this question that I posed about what elements of a business email make you cringe the most. So I gave people 4 options, but then I said, hey, if I haven't covered the option that you think is most important, then write it in the comments. So here's what we knew. I gave them 4 options. And the number one response, 33% of people said their number one, cringeworthy moment with a business email was improper grammar or punctuation mistakes. And, we're going to talk about this without a doubt, but come on, we all have spell check. Let's use it. Now, before I dive into this, I'm not saying that I have been 1,000% perfect in all these areas, but they are important to me, and there's reasons why we're going to cover them. 31% of my respondents said spelling errors. So again, grammar and punctuation, our spell check and our check systems count for these, but spelling errors definitely is something that we can avoid if we choose to. 20% said the use of an unprofessional email address. I'll talk about that. And I don't mean that it's a naughty one, but sometimes just the way we write them might not be professional enough and doesn't convey what we're trying to say. 15% said they were annoyed by informal verbiage, and that could even be texting lingo, which we'll talk about, or use of emoticons. Good, bad, or ugly. There's lots of people who feel that way. Now, some other things that people added in were things like CCing a ton of people that don't need to be on the email. In other words, sometimes people use that to CYA, cover your, what I'm talking about. Sometimes people CC a lot of people to, shame you, or a little bit of, just being passive aggressive. So we're going to talk about whether or not you need to make those mistakes or decisions. Another thing that somebody said was hitting reply all when you don't need to, or really when you shouldn't, which hits some of those other elements. Using texting lingo instead of being more formal where it's appropriate. Unsolicited emails that are about solving a problem that somebody doesn't even know you have. Okay, that can get into marketing with emails. We won't dive into that too much. Calling people by the wrong name. I get this a lot. And I'll tell you a funny story about that because a lot of times people just assume I'm a man, which tells me they haven't researched me at all. And one of my headhunting friends also said that she made an extra mention of people, why for her unprofessional emails are really a problem is because then you're trying to get a job. So you want to make sure that you're coming across the right way. She also said, hey, by the way, if you have your headshot in your email or on your resume and it's a selfie that you've taken, probably not the best way to present yourself. So, why are these things important? You know, we're going to talk about the whys as we go through the top 10 tips, but I just want you to ask yourself this question. How are you coming across when you write or type? And is it sending the message that you want to send? And if it isn't, then it's a good time to sit back and ask yourself some questions. Just a side note, because I thought I would take a little time to tell a fun little story about people making an assumption through an email without doing some research. And this has to do with me, having the first name Michael and people sometimes assuming I'm a man, which I understand. I totally do. But if you're going to solicit my business by email, I would assume or I suggest that you actually do some research. I know that might mean extra work, but it's important. Why? A couple months back, gosh, maybe 6 months ago, I had somebody who was trying to send me a guest that they wanted to put on my podcast. And they said, hey, I love your podcast. I'd like you to consider my client as a guest on your podcast. In fact, I love your podcast so much. I went on iTunes and I gave you a 5-star rating. So I was like, well, that's cool. So I went to the link on the 5-star rating they gave me, which was a 5-star rating, which is wonderful. Those things are important for your podcast when you have them. But they made comments like, this is a great podcast, so much valuable information. And then they said, the host does such a great job every time he interviews someone. And I was like, really? Come on. Eventually, that person did change their rating to make sure that it sounded like I was a female. And hopefully, then they actually listened into the podcast. But regardless of the funny stories, there are critical elements to take, the steps you can take that will help you make sure that the way you communicate with your colleagues, your boss, potential clients, current clients, and customers actually aligns to the vision of what you're trying to accomplish. So, here are my top 10 tips for making sure that your business emails or texts or WhatsApp communications or Teams chat box actually shows the best in you. Tip number one, enable spell check. I've already said it. Please do. There is no format that doesn't have some version of spell check. Please, please turn it on and then pay attention to it. And if you don't have it or don't know how to enable it, that goes into tip number 2, which actually could be for not having spell check, but also there'll be a good idea if you just want another way to look a little bit more at a distance before you send an important email. So tip number 2 is consider writing your email first on a Word document. See how it looks there. See what comes up for formatting errors or spelling errors or punctuation errors. When you put something on a Word document, yes, I know this might be a little extra work, but it allows you to have some distance and see what it might look like to somebody else. It'll also tell you a few things like if you're going on a little too long, which if I remember at the end, I'll tell you another funny story. Tip number 3, consider your audience. Sometimes our emails are written to people that are very informal, our colleagues, our boss when we're going back and forth on something, maybe a client that we've had a long time and we're having a good, solid interchange that doesn't need to be too professional. That's okay. That's one scenario. But if it's new in a business relationship, it's new in a consulting or freelance situation, if it's new opportunity to gain a client and you're not coming through as professional, that can hurt you. That can cost you business. It can cost you credibility. So consider your audience. Who are you reaching out to? And how is it going to be impacted by what you write or by what you type? Now, we all know I had another comment that I made on this when I posted that this was going live, and I had a great friend of mine say, "What do you do about that guy who's always constantly like listening to you and autocorrecting or writing things you don't expect?" Yes, before you hit send, make sure that the autocorrect hasn't given you something to say that you don't want it to say. And I have a really great example of that, which I won't tell any of you because it's very embarrassing. Thankfully, not for me, but somebody I love. And it was a very almost horrible situation. But I think you can all imagine what things those could be. So, number four, what is more important to you? The speed of your response to an email or a text, or time taken for reflection? Oh, and here I slowed down just for a minute because I've been going nonstop really fast with all my points. And sometimes people need an immediate response right away. This is urgent. The house is on fire. Everything has to be responded to right now. In which case, you may not have time or opportunity to craft the perfectly responded email. But in other times, what does that opportunity for a couple deep breaths, that extra 30 seconds to read, review, and make sure that that's what you want to hit before you hit send? That's that moment to consider what is more important in this situation because oftentimes people will respond to things very, very quickly. And in that quick response, you may not be giving the message that you want to. Or you may look back on it and say, gosh, if I would have taken a little bit extra time, I would have answered all those questions. Or I would have gone through to make sure I hit all those points when I responded and said, I'm done with those things you asked me to. But I really didn't go through and look at them one more time to see, oh, maybe out of the 10 things you asked me to do, I only got 7 done. So that time for reflection is important, and that shows quality. Tip number 5. Are you replying to just reply? Okay, let me just tell you, many of you, if you follow me, you know that my email inbox is the nightmare that I face. Currently, I think I'm at 112. My attempt is always to get it to 0 by Fridays, by 5 o'clock. I am not always successful. Right now, I'm successful about 50% of the time in a month. So 2 out of 4 Fridays a month on average, I'm there. I haven't been for the last few Fridays. So it's very, very frustrating to me because for me, anything in the inbox is something I still need to do. But if you are just replying to say, got it, do I need to know that? Or are you saying that because you think you're covering your own patootie? Do I need to know that because you just want to say it? Or is it important? Am I replying just to reply? Or is there something that I really need to do to let somebody know that I've seen their message? Now, I can't answer for you whether or not that's right or wrong or good or bad. It depends on the situation, the person, what's going on in the whole story. But if you're replying just to reply and it's not important, then all you're doing is adding one more email into their inbox. That doesn't always get you what you need. Now, sometimes it is important, so make sure you're following that. Number 6, who are you copying and why? And that came back to that other thing about why do we just continue to add and add and add people when we're writing emails? Sometimes it's for information, important. Totally get it. That's everybody's on the same page. Sometimes it's important to copy people because you're trying to show up the ladder of chain of command. And I encourage that in certain circumstances where you need to maybe throw a little extra muscle. Hey, by the way, I'm copying the boss on this one. But the use of the CC is very, very important. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to use it in the wrong situations, and you want to be careful of what it says about you. If you are the person that copies everyone all the time, it tells me that either you think that that's going to make you look better or more important, or you're afraid to leave anybody out, and then you're not communicating effectively in the first place. So the use of the CC is one of those elements that you got to use wisely, but use it in moderation and only when it's appropriate. Number 7, what are you trying to accomplish with the email or text? Information giving, trying to build a relationship, trying to further the customer opportunity along. Make sure that before you hit send, that you're asking yourself, what am I trying to accomplish with this message? And is how I responded or how I wrote it originally aligned to that? And if so, hit send and go for it. If not, take that moment to review it and ask yourself, is this going to help me move forward in what I want to? Number 8, can I say it better in fewer words? Or better words. In other words, in other words, can you take that time to sit back and read and say, hmm, have I used too many words? Have I used not enough? Am I clear? One of my team, God love her, probably the first year that she worked for me and she knows who she is, every time she'd send me a message, I'm like, "I don't understand what you're saying. I don't understand what you're asking," because she'd respond with so few words that I didn't quite follow the bouncing ball. So now we have this great dynamic. I think she got tired of me saying, "I don't understand." But now what we've found is we found ways to communicate more effectively. And we actually do it by a lot of voice messages or video messages that we send that can convey more information quickly. But, fewer or better words, I'm gonna tell you one last story at the end. Don't let me forget because it's a great one. Number 9, do you give what's needed in a way that's easy to access? And what I mean by this is sometimes we're trying to convey a lot of information by email, but what we could also be doing to make it easier instead of having big descriptions of things is having links. Links to somebody's bio, links to somebody's LinkedIn page, link to your websites that you're talking about. Giving people easy access so it's not a big, long, bulky email, but that rather there's bullet points that people can follow is so much easier to digest in our world that everything is a brief segment. And the best example I can give of this is the Skim newsletter. That's a daily newsletter Monday through Friday, which has all kind of the top news issues of the world in this great little email that's very, very short. And if you want to know more about any of the topics, they link it. So if they're talking about what's going on in Afghanistan and it's talking about whatever, there'll be a link to some other parts of that story. So if you want to know more of the backstory, you can link to it. We can use that same kind of concept in our work emails and make things much, much smoother, cleaner, and easier to access. Number 10, read, reread, and reread out loud before you hit send on an important email. My team is probably tired of me saying this. So here's the thing. Sometimes we think that what's coming out of our heads through our fingers onto the keyboard will actually make sense to somebody else who's reading it. And in that process, we might forget that we've said it with too many words, said it with too few words. We haven't used the right sentences. We haven't used the right grammar or the punctuation errors. Or maybe I've run on sentences. Maybe I have incomplete sentences. If it's an important email, take the time to read it, reread it, and finally read it out loud to yourself. It will tell you whether or not you should hit send. So the final story that I want to hit with you or leave with you, it goes back to that number 8. Can you say it with fewer or better words? I love to write. Obviously, I've written a couple books. I've got some more coming out. I love to write. I've spent a lot of time writing a lot of blog articles. And throughout my sales career, I've had a lot of fun telling a lot of stories to try and convey different sales messages, for instance, in different ways. And I remember I wrote this, I used to have this weekly email long, long ago, many positions ago, which was supposed to motivate people and get them excited about their sales opportunities in front of them that day and that week. And I wrote this incredible email one day about an experience that I'd had the weekend before where someone had encouraged me to order dessert at a restaurant that I did not intend to order. In fact, if you want to know the story, go into my LinkedIn profile and it's one of the articles that I still have, and it's about molten chocolate lava cake. So it's a great read, I think. But where it is an article today, I wrote it as an email. And it was a long email. It was very, very long. And I thought it was great. It was well written. It was a great story. It was fantastic. It was too long. And I had somebody, thankfully, who really loved my stuff and loved what I did, but who, with love and consideration, said to me, Michael, I love everything you write. I can't read your emails. No matter how much I want to, I don't have time. And frankly, when I open it up and I see it's a 10-page long email, now she was exaggerating a little, but not by much, I just can't do it, even though I want to. And that was the point I realized that brevity is important, but it's not really about making it short. It's about using the most powerful words you can that say the most with the fewest letters, characters, and words. And that's about making sure we get to the heart of the issue. So when we talk about making sure that we are harnessing the power of words, we're understanding that harnessing means that you have to take action. Harnessing is an active word where we are consciously aware of the words we use, spoken, written, and typed. And when we do that, we can use the power of those words to make sure we have better opportunities, more business, more credibility, and that we leave a greater impact on this world. So that's those are my thoughts for today. Thank you for joining me. If you want to learn more about what we do, obviously go to shockyourpotential.com, and we'll see what we've got on the agenda for next week. I think you're going to enjoy it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week ahead.